Imagine walking into a massive modern supermarket just to buy a box of cereal.
Oh, the cereal aisle. I
Uh,
know it well.
right. You turn down the aisle, and suddenly you are staring at an entire wall of cardboard boxes. I mean, there are literally hundreds of options.
Oh, yeah, it's overwhelming.
You've got organic bran, marshmallow-filled sugar bombs, gluten-free ancient grains, keto-friendly puffs, and you have the absolute freedom to choose any single one of them.
The Neve of...
But as you stand there, staring at this wall of endless options, do you actually feel, I don't know, profoundly liberated?
Probably not.
Exactly. Or do you just feel this strange sense of paralysis, maybe even a little anxiety, before you eventually just grab the same box of Cheerios you always buy?
Yeah, the safe choice.
Right. So today we are taking a deep dive into a stack of philosophical and theological texts that suggest this exact feeling, this paralysis in the face of endless options, is actually the defining crisis of our modern culture.
It really is.
We're looking at the Catholic perspective on freedom, and our mission today is to explore a wildly countercultural question. What if true freedom has absolutely nothing to do with having limitless options and literally everything to do with becoming what you were made for?
It's a complete inversion of how we are conditioned to think, honestly.
It really is.
The texts we are synthesizing today argue that the modern definition of freedom, which is basically, the ability to do whatever you want, whenever you want, without anyone telling you otherwise, is actually a deeply flawed framework.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, and when you approach these sources, you realize they aren't just nitpicking a cultural trend.
Yeah.
They are suggesting that building a life around limitless choices might actually be, well, a sophisticated trap.
I want to push back on that immediately, just because the cultural messaging we all hear is the exact opposite.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, we are constantly told to live your own truth, and that anyone imposing rules on you is just trying to control you.
Right, that's the narrative.
Like, I look at my own life, and I have the freedom to live in dozens of different cities, apply for thousands of different jobs, or, stream 10,000 different movies tonight.
Endless option.
Yeah. And I feel incredibly lucky to have that. So, are these texts really arguing that having all those options is somehow bad for me?
Well, no, the philosophy actually makes a really crucial distinction here. Having economic or geographic options isn't inherently evil,
Okay.
but the texts identify a phenomenon they call the freedom of indifference.
Freedom of indifference.
Yeah. This is what happens when we take that supermarket logic, the idea that more options automatically equals more freedom, and we apply it to our morality, our values, and our human nature.
So we treat right and wrong like the cereal aisle.
Exactly. Freedom of indifference is the belief that the ideal state of human existence is a neutral starting point where you are completely unconstrained and every single direction is equally valid. It's the sheer, shallow ability to choose absolutely anything.
Okay, let's unpack this. So it's treating life like a blank whiteboard where I can draw whatever I want and no one can tell me my drawing is wrong.
Precisely. But here is where the Catholic philosophical tradition fundamentally disagrees with the modern world.
Okay.
The texts point out that the human experience consistently proves that total, unstructured choice doesn't actually lead to liberation.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it almost always leads to chaos, and eventually to enslavement.
Enslavement, that's a strong word.
It is, but the flaw in the freedom of indifference is the assumption that every choice is a neutral exercise of your willpower. The reality is that choices are not neutral. The things you choose actually turn around and shape who you are.
Okay, I think I see where this is going, but help me understand the mechanism there. How does having the freedom to choose my own values or, indulge my impulses turn into enslavement?
Let's look at the psychology of habit, which these texts lean on heavily.
Okay.
Every time you make a choice, you are carving a neurological and spiritual groove into your character.
A groove, right.
So if you use your freedom to indulge a quick burst of anger every time someone cuts you off in traffic.
Which I might do from time to time.
Right, we all do.
Yeah.
But you aren't just making isolated, free choices. You are actively training your brain and your soul to default to rage.
Oh, wow.
And eventually you become a thoroughly angry person. You hit a point where you literally cannot control your temper.
I lose the choice.
Exactly. At that stage, you aren't the captain of the ship anymore. Your anger is.
That makes total sense. You start out thinking you're calling the shots, but eventually the repetition of those choices builds a cage around you.
And this applies to anything, really. Greed, selfishness, addiction, lust. The source material draws heavily on St. Paul to explain this mechanism.
Well, what does he say?
In the book of Romans, chapter 6, verse 16, Paul writes, "Do you not know that to whom you offer yourselves as servants to obey, his servants you are, whether of sin unto death or of obedience unto justice?"
Wow, so you're always serving something.
Exactly. He's pointing out a hard structural truth about human beings. We are always serving something.
So sin just kind of tricks us.
Right. Sin, which in this context we can understand as choosing things that are objectively destructive to our nature, always promises freedom. It says, throw off the rules, do what feels good.
Yeah, the classic temptation.
But the end result of doing whatever you want is that your desires become your master.
Okay, so if treating my life like an endless buffet of unstructured choices eventually turns me into a slave to my worst habits, what is the alternative?
That's the big question.
Because, nobody wants to be a slave to their impulses, but nobody wants to be a mindless robot just following a list of restrictive religious rules either.
Right, and the alternative requires completely tossing out the idea that freedom is just a lack of obstacles.
Okay.
In the Catholic framework, freedom is intrinsically linked to something else entirely, which is truth. The foundational text for this is a quote from Jesus in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 32. He says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free."
The truth shall set you free.
Yeah.
Man, that completely shifts the metric.
It really does.
It's not your options will set you free or your authentic desires will set you free. It's the truth.
Which means true freedom isn't found in ignoring reality so you can invent your own universe. True freedom is found in aligning yourself with the reality of how things actually are.
Getting in sync with reality.
Exactly. And the texts use a very famous, very mechanical analogy to help visualize this because, it can feel a bit abstract.
Okay, what's the analogy?
They ask us to consider a train.
Oh, a locomotive. Massive engine, thousands of horsepower, tons of raw potential energy.
Yes. A train is an incredibly powerful machine, but its entire design, its entire structural integrity is predicated on one thing.
The tracks.
Running on steel tracks, it is built to fit those specific rails. Now imagine that train attains consciousness and decides to embrace the modern freedom of indifference.
Oh boy.
It looks at the tracks and says, "These rails are a straitjacket. They only let me go forward or backward. That's not freedom. I want to go explore that beautiful meadow over there."
So it just derails itself.
Right. So the train forces itself off the tracks and heads out into the open field. Does it suddenly become a freer, more self-actualized train?
Well, obviously not. The sheer weight of the engine would cause it to plow right into the dirt.
Exactly.
The wheels would get jammed with mud and rocks. The machinery would tear itself apart and it would come to a permanent grinding halt.
Yeah.
By trying to free itself from the tracks, it actually destroyed its ability to move at all.
And that physical breakdown is exactly how these philosophical texts view human nature.
So we are the train.
We are the train. The argument is that human beings are not blank slates. We have a specific nature. We have tracks.
Well, okay.
We are objectively designed, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually, for truth, for love, for goodness, and ultimately for communion with God.
So the rules aren't just arbitrary.
No, the moral laws of Christianity aren't arbitrary speed limits set by a cosmic dictator just to ruin our fun. They are the manufacturer's description of where the tracks are.
So when we decide to jump the tracks, when we say, I'm going to define right and wrong for myself, we aren't bravely exploring a new frontier.
Not at all.
We are just a 100-ton locomotive sinking into a muddy field. We experience the emotional and spiritual breakdown of our own machinery.
Yes.
We get anxiety, we get isolation, we get the enslavement to our impulses that we talked about earlier.
Which brings us to a massive psychological hurdle for most people. Even if someone listens to this and says, okay, I buy the train analogy, I accept that human nature has tracks.
Right. Acknowledging the tracks is one thing.
Exactly. Looking down a long list of moral constraints can still feel incredibly heavy. It can feel like you are just grit your teeth submitting to restrictions.
Totally.
How does a person stay on the tracks without feeling completely stifled?
That is the million-dollar question right there. Because knowing the tracks exist doesn't automatically make me want to stay on them.
Right.
When my alarm goes off at 5 a.m., the truth is that I should get up and be productive. But my immediate desire is to stay in my warm bed.
Naturally.
Doing the right thing often feels like a restriction of my immediate comfort.
And this is where we shift from the modern freedom of indifference to the classical Catholic concept, which is called freedom for excellence.
Freedom for excellence.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is the core antidote to the modern crisis.
Okay, Break down the mechanics of that. How does it actually work?
So, if the freedom of indifference is the shallow, passive ability to choose anything at random, freedom for excellence is an active, acquired power.
Acquired, like a skill.
Exactly. It is the ability to choose the good consistently, effortlessly, and joyfully. It's not something you were born with. It's a capability that has to be developed through intense discipline.
Okay.
The Catechism of the Catholic Church, in paragraph 1733, states this in a way that sounds like a total paradox to modern ears.
What does it say?
It says, "The more one does what is good, the freer one becomes. There is no true freedom except in the service of what is good and just."
The more one does what is good, the freer one becomes.
Mhm.
I'm going to pause on the word capability that you just used.
Yeah, it's key.
Because treating freedom as a capability rather than a lack of obstacles totally changes the game. It makes me think of learning a complex skill, like playing the piano.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. Because if you sit me down at a grand piano right now, I have total freedom of indifference.
Hmm.
There are no external constraints on me. No one is telling me what notes to play. I can mash my hands on the keys however I want.
Right. You're free to make a racket.
Exactly. But I am not free to play a Beethoven sonata. I literally lack the capability. The result of my unstructured choices is just going to be terrible noise.
That is the perfect modern equivalent. You have no rules, but you also have no power.
But then you look at a master concert pianist. To get to a point where they can walk out on stage, sit down, and effortlessly improvise a beautiful, moving piece of music, what did they have to do?
Practice.
Yes. They had to subject themselves to thousands of hours of incredibly strict, rigid discipline. They had to practice boring, repetitive scales. They had to learn the strict rules of music theory. They had to hold their wrists at exact, uncomfortable angles until their muscle memory adapted.
And in the beginning, that discipline probably felt like torture.
Oh, definitely.
That felt like a restriction of their freedom.
Totally. They probably wanted to quit 100 times.
Yeah.
But eventually, the repetition of those rules literally rewired their neurological pathways.
Right.
The discipline stopped being an external set of rules and became an internal part of who they are. The strict scaffolding of music theory is what actually gave them the power, the freedom to express themselves beautifully.
And that neurological rewiring you just described is exactly how these texts describe Christian moral formation. Moral discipline works the same way as physical discipline.
So the rules are like the scales.
Exactly. The rules of Christian morality, charity, chastity, humility, patience, are the practice scales for the human soul. St. Paul captures this beautifully in Galatians chapter 5.
What does he say there?
Well, in verse 1, he tells the early Christians, "Stand firm and do not be held again under the yoke of servitude." He wants them to be free.
Okay, so freedom is the goal.
Yes. But then in verse 13, he gives them the formula for maintaining that freedom. He writes, "For you have been called to freedom, only do not use freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another through charity."
So don't use freedom as an excuse to just mash the piano keys of your base desires.
Exactly.
Use it to master the art of charity.
The sources emphasize that virtue is a habit. At first, choosing not to gossip or choosing to be generous with your money or choosing to forgive someone who wronged you. It feels hard.
It really does. It goes against our instincts.
It feels like you are restricting your natural impulses. But as you practice that discipline, your soul gains muscle memory. You start to acquire the freedom for excellence.
And it gets easier.
Right. You eventually reach a point where doing the right thing isn't an agonizing struggle against your desires. Your desires themselves have actually been healed and elevated. You want the good.
Wow, that reframes the entire concept of religion. It's not a warden trying to keep you locked in a cell.
No, not at all.
It's a coach putting you through a grueling training camp so you can actually win the game.
Exactly.
You don't want a pilot who decides to live their own truth and ignore the pre-flight checklist. The pilot's total submission to the laws of aerodynamics and the strict procedures of aviation is what guarantees the freedom to safely fly a 300-ton metal tube across the ocean.
That submission to reality is the key. But, we shouldn't just leave this as a neat philosophical theory.
Okay.
The texts we are examining point to a very specific historical group of people as the ultimate lived proof of this concept.
You mean the people who bought into this system completely?
Yeah.
The people who practiced the moral scales harder than anyone else?
Yes, the saints.
Ah, the saints.
The texts present us with a profound historical paradox. If the modern world is right, If rules, self-denial, and religious structure inherently destroy human freedom and cause misery, then the Catholic saints should logically be the most psychologically stunted, miserable, suffocated people in recorded history.
Because they lived by the strictest rules imaginable.
Exactly.
That's a fascinating test of the theory. If rules equal misery, the saints should be completely miserable. But anyone who reads history knows that's not the case.
It's the exact opposite. Even secular historians often note that the defining characteristic of the great saints is a massive, inexplicable vitality.
Can you give an example from the text?
Sure, take St. Francis of Assisi. He is a primary example in these texts. By modern standards, Francis ruined his life.
How so?
Well, he was the son of a wealthy merchant. He had endless options. He had peak freedom of indifference. He could have been a businessman, a knight, a politician.
He had the whole cereal aisle.
Exactly. But he literally stripped off his expensive clothes in the town square, gave up all his wealth, and embraced a life of radical, absolute poverty.
He voluntarily threw away every option he had.
Mhm.
He chose the tracks over the meadow.
And yet what happened? He didn't become a miserable, repressed ascetic hiding in a cave. He walked through 13th century Europe radiating so much joy and lightness that thousands of people abandoned their own lives just to follow him.
That's incredible.
He had no money, no property, no options, but he possessed a freedom that terrified and fascinated the people in power.
The texts also bring up Teresa of Calcutta, right? Which is another perfect example of this paradox.
Yes, Mother Teresa.
We're talking about someone who woke up before dawn every day to do grueling, heartbreaking physical labor in the slums, surrounded by the smell of death and disease.
A very hard life.
She wasn't out exploring the world or curating a bespoke lifestyle. She was entirely bound by rigid vows and a commitment to serve the absolute lowest rung of society.
Right.
But her internal freedom gave her the moral authority to stand in front of world leaders and speak hard truths. She changed the global conversation about human dignity.
Pope John Paul II wrote extensively on this exact phenomenon. He taught that freedom finds its ultimate fulfillment in truth and love.
Truth and love.
It doesn't find its fulfillment in endless autonomy. When you analyze Francis of Assisi or Mother Teresa through the lens of the freedom for excellence, you realize you aren't looking at restricted people.
What are we looking at then?
You are looking at the master concert pianists of humanity.
Oh, man. They'd practiced the scales of virtue so intensely for so many years that choosing radical love and complete self-gift was entirely second nature to them.
Perfectly said.
They were fully on the tracks, and because of that, their human nature was moving forward with an unstoppable power.
That synthesizes the core message of these sources perfectly. When the modern culture looks at Christianity and says, that limits your freedom, the philosophical response is that Christianity actually liberates freedom from an illusion.
It rescues us from the exhausting, paralyzing illusion that doing whatever we want will somehow make us happy.
Yes, it rescues us from the cereal aisle.
Exactly.
And it redirects that energy toward true fulfillment. It reveals that real freedom isn't the absence of constraints. It is the acquired power to live in the truth, to choose the good consistently, and to ultimately become the specific masterpiece that God designed you to be.
It's not about being held down. It's about being built up so you can actually handle the weight and the speed of what you were built for.
Precisely.
This has been a massive paradigm shift. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you go about your week. We've talked a lot today about the exhaustion of endless options versus the power of discipline.
We really have.
So I want you to think about a technology you probably carry in your pocket every single day, an endless social media feed.
Oh, the ultimate endless aisle.
Right. When you open up that app, you are experiencing the absolute peak of the freedom of indifference. You are presented with limitless, unstructured options. You can scroll forever. You can passively consume a million different lives, a million different opinions, a million different micro-entertainments. No one is stopping you.
Total freedom, supposedly.
But I want you to be really honest with yourself. When you finally lock your screen after an hour of endless scrolling, do you feel profoundly free? Do you feel alive, joyful, and purposeful? Or do you feel drained?
Usually drained.
Do you feel a little bit like that train that jumped the tracks to explore the meadow and is now just sitting there spinning its heavy steel wheels deep in the mud?
That's a powerful image.
If endless options don't actually liberate us, what does that mean for how you structure your day? As you step into tomorrow, ask yourself what personal guardrails, what strict daily disciplines could you voluntarily put in place today that might actually give you the freedom to excel tomorrow?
Practice the scales.
Exactly. What are the difficult, boring practice skills you need to start playing in your own life so that eventually you can improvise something beautiful? Because as these texts remind us, true freedom is never found by ignoring the tracks. True freedom is found in discovering exactly what kind of train you're always meant to be